I will now recognize our distinguished current members, each for 3 minutes to provide summaries of your testimony. Their written remarks will be submitted for the record. I now recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Torres, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and members for convening this hearing. I want to start by thanking the heroes that saved the day that day, and that is the law enforcement officers, Capitol Police, who were here protecting us. 5 years ago, I was on the balcony of the House chamber as a violent mob instructed by Donald Trump to march to the Capitol and to stop the certification of a free and fair election invaded the Capitol. Those were the scariest 45 minutes of my life. Reading the alerts, preparing to fight, working watching my colleagues being evacuated below us and not seeing a clear exit for myself. No immediate security, and a balcony door that would not be locked, that couldn't be locked from the inside. Before coming to Congress, I spent more than 17 years as a 911 dispatcher. That training took over for me that day. I have heard horrific crimes unfold in my ears. I've never saw myself being involved in one. I began recording and photographing what was happening, not knowing if the security cameras were still working. I did not know then that those images would become some of the only evidence of the terror unfolding in the gallery. I know what gunshots sound like, but when I heard one inside the Capitol, I had to question whether it was real. It was unthinkable that a gun could be fired inside the temple of American democracy. When the shot rang out, we were lying face down on the floor just above it. At one point, officers believed that they had cleared a path for evacuation. We had only seconds. And as I looked back to make sure every member was moving towards safety, time ran out. We were ordered down again to be silent and to crawl away from the threat. Eventually, another path was cleared, and we were told to run. And as we exited the balcony, we saw men running toward us in plain clothes. And for a moment, we thought they were part of the mob. They turned out to be our security, who escorted us to a safe room. And as I began to run down the first of 3 flights of steps, my phone rang. Up until that moment, I was in survival mode. I did not think to call my family, but I answered a call from my son. My son is a police officer. He was watching the attack unfold on television. I had seconds to tell him, "Sweetheart, I am okay. I can't talk to you right now. I am running for my life." 5 years later, the threat to fuel that violence has returned. The same president who incited is back, and more than 1,500 January 6 violent insurrectionists have been pardoned. We cannot erase the violence of January 6, 2021, and I am introducing legislation to confront political violence, close accountability gaps, and preserve the truth. The January 6 Truth and Transparency Act tracks whether pardoned individuals re-offend. The Insurrection Sentencing Enhancement Act ensures January 6 convictions carry consequences, even if later pardoned. The January 6 Oral History Project Act preserves firsthand testimony, so the truth is never erased or rewritten. These laws are about truth, responsibility, and memory. We want the American people to know what happens after the January 6th pardons, that violence against our democracy has real consequences, and that the truth of that day is never erased or rewritten. Thank you, Chairman Thompson, for the opportunity to be with all of you today.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Chair will yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to everyone who took time today to make sure that we do not forget the truth of January 6th. The videos, audio, and photographs of the violent domestic terrorists who attacked the Capitol 5 years ago are still very chilling for those of us who were there that day. And frankly, much of what we've heard today is really triggering. It's for those of us who were trapped in the gallery, it's really hard to relive that terror and that trauma. And so I'm grateful to all of you for your strength and resilience. I've many times recounted the terror, rage, and fear I felt while trapped in the gallery of the House of Representatives and the trauma that followed. But I'd like to focus on something that doesn't nearly get enough attention in our country: the betrayal by Donald Trump of the brave men and women who defended us and our nation's capital that day. Some of them were here with us during this event. These brave patriots, these law enforcement heroes, were beaten, attacked, some died, and the emotional and physical injuries that they sustained remain to this day. Some of them had to leave their law enforcement career, a career that they loved, because of those injuries. And some of those who had to leave their careers still haven't financially recuperated. It is absolutely shameful that while Donald Trump pardoned and released nearly 1,600 of those insurrectionists, members of the violent mob, there are law enforcement professionals who were forced to retire who are still struggling today, who still have to get physical therapy, who still have to undergo serious behavioral health treatment, all because they defended our democracy and defended us. Many of those who were pardoned have gone on to commit additional crimes like child molestation, kidnapping, and sexual assault. And by the way, they're back in DC today. They are celebrating themselves and they're marching to the Capitol. But back to our heroes and our protectors. Despite the loss of their career, their health, and mental health, what's been outrageous is that these officers are being denied their public safety officers' benefits. To date, not a single living injured January 6th officer has been awarded this benefit, and some are resorting to GoFundMe accounts in order to get by. We have to fix this. We have to address this. This is not right. And at the same time, Donald Trump has talked about setting up a compensation fund for the criminals who committed these horrific acts. Colleagues, we cannot let this happen. We will not let this happen. I want to again thank these law enforcement heroes for saving our lives, for their courage, for their commitment, and their resilience. Every American should know that this administration, led by the man who inspired this attack and who has never faced accountability for this attack, this administration rewards criminals and punishes patriots. As long as we are alive, we will not allow history to be whitewashed. And as long as we are in public service, we have to remain committed to a country where truth matters and where these patriots are protected and upheld. Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my neighbor to the south. This is a day none of us will forget. I was in the gallery. I had my phone with me, so I could see some of the information of what was going on outside, but we didn't know it was going to come to the chamber. at some point I saw kind of disorder on the floor, and the sergeant at arms coming down, and some of the member on the dais who was presiding coming down, and I knew something was happening. And I looked down and I yelled, "Call Trump and tell him to call his Revolutionary Guard off." Of course, they didn't do that, but it was the Revolutionary Guard, and they still are there. And I don't know if they're with ICE or if they're standing for another time, stand back to stand by. They're around, and Trump hadn't changed. I got up and an officer came who was helping protect him, make sure the doors were locked, and I heard the pounding on the doors and all, and he helped me put my mask on. And I was walking out, David Trone preceded me to go out in the gallery, and there's rails in the gallery, and we were going out towards the Republican side, and Trone just put his leg over it and kind of went on. Well, I got a real bad leg from having polio, and I knew if I put my leg over there, I might get stuck on that pole, and that'd be real embarrassing. It may be painful too. So I limboed, in a kind of a reverse limbo, and got under the pole, the rail, and got out. We got in an elevator, and we came down, and a couple of guys said, "Where do we go now?" I said, "Just follow me and come on." And we went as fast as we could towards Rayburn, while we saw policemen come in the opposite direction with their guns out. It was a scary time. I got to my office in Rayburn, I locked the doors to the outside, and I locked myself in my office. And while I was there, I probably got at least 500 texts and phone calls from everybody I'd ever met in my life, I think. Well, my hero as a child was a ball player named Minnie Minoso. We maintained a friendship through his life and up until the fact we, in essence, got him in the Hall of Fame, helped with that, and we were friends and we'll be friends forever. So I'm sitting there with got a Minnie Minoso bat in my hand, sitting in my office, waiting for him to come in. And one of my text messages is from Charlie Minoso, Charlie Rice Minoso, who's Minnie's son. He said, "I hope you're okay, and I hope everybody in the office is okay. I'm concerned about you. I want you to know, my dad will be thinking about you." I said, "I got your dad's bat in my hand." And he said, "If he was there, he'd be swinging it." I said, "You're damn right he would." Well, we stayed there, and I watched the tube, and then we got up and went and voted, and that was a great day that we voted. Speaker Pelosi was heroic in getting us called back, and Mike Pence was heroic in not succumbing to President Trump's dictations that he changed the law and the rules and count the votes differently. All of the public officers were great. Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police here, National Guardsmen and others, great heroes. And I value all of them, and they protect us every day, and they don't get the respect that they should and the regard. But I think the greatest hero of all is Jack Smith. Jack Smith is like Mr. Stewart Goes to Washington. He is a lawyer who is a lawyer's lawyer. And he found in his work that there was an indictable offense, and he indicted the president for what he did. That needed to happen. He was only stopped because of the Justice Department's rule that you can't prosecute a sitting president. It was not dropped. It was because Trump won the election. But Jack Smith pursued it all the way through. And he is, in my opinion, he testified before a Republican committee that was set up to try to get him in a trap so they could prosecute him for something they could create. Their vindictive tour needs to stop, but it's still going on, a vendetta. Jack Smith stood firm. He spoke truth, even though he knew that if he said anything at all that they could possibly conjure up in another manner, he would be indicted, and they'd probably take his bar license away and try to put him in jail. He said he followed the facts and then applied it to the law. In his recent deposition, he told the Judiciary Committee, "The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions, as alleged in the indictments returned by the grand jury in 2 different districts. Our investigation developed and proved beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power." That was heroic actions by him. President Trump is a treasonous individual, and it's awful that he's still in the White House and destroyed the East Wing, and as Mr. Raskin quite said, had graffiti put up over John Kennedy's name at the Kennedy Center. One date, somebody mentioned, dates we'll always remember it, and a September date, January date, and Pearl Harbor. We'll never forget November 22, 1963, of those of us who are alive. I remember it all the time. Whenever I think about it, I start to tear up. I'm about to tear up now. And the idea that he put his name over John Kennedy's should never be forgotten, and he should be wiped out. I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to Leader Jeffries and all of the other leaders who have made sure that we commemorate this day appropriately with this hearing. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and the United States Capitol has been a building permanently etched in my mind from an early age. It regularly came into my view as daily life took my family and I around the District of Columbia. To me, the Capitol was always a citadel, a beacon of freedom, democracy, and justice. At the age of 10, I developed the vision that one day I would serve there as a legislator. I was always so proud. Even today, I'm still in awe of the United States Capitol, what it stands for, and the fact that it has been my workplace for the last 19 years. On January 6, 2021, amidst social distancing in response to the COVID pandemic, then still ongoing, I was so proud to be one of a limited number of members of the House to be in the chamber to witness the certification of the 2020 elections. Though somewhat envious of those who were seated on the floor, I nonetheless savored the honor of having a seat in the House gallery from which I could observe this solemn proceeding. As the peaceful transfer of power was taking place in the chamber, the proceedings were rudely, then violently interrupted. The disorder became louder and louder as the insurrectionists got nearer and nearer. The cacophony shut down the speaker and caused the business of the House to stop. From the gallery, I watched as the speaker was extracted from the chair and my colleagues evacuated from the floor. What would happen to us in the gallery, I thought. The situation became scary, dire, and dangerous. I felt like a sitting duck. In those moments, while in self-preservation mode, I thought of jumping from the gallery onto the House floor so that I could be evacuated. My thoughts then turned to my colleagues also in the gallery, and my thoughts turned to my moral responsibility to them. I would never leave them to save myself. As we were being spirited out of the chamber into the hallway, I saw dozens of violent insurrectionists lying spread-eagled on the marble floor under the gunpoint of Capitol Hill police. I later learned that all of those insurrectionists had been released without charges because there were not enough law enforcement manpower to take them into custody. They all walked. They came into the U.S. Capitol, disrupted our work, and desecrated this citadel of democracy, and they all walked. Needless to say, I was gratified later when more than 1,500 perpetrators were prosecuted, some of the worst offenders receiving 20-year sentences. There was a sense that people had been held accountable for their crimes. Then on January 20th, 2025, Donald J. Trump shot Lady Justice on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight by pardoning each and every January 6th insurrectionist. It was a blow to justice and the rule of law in America. And my sense of anger at injustice has intensified as Donald Trump and his lapdog Republicans in Congress do everything in their power in an unholy and futile attempt to whitewash and rewrite the history of what happened on January 6th. While Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans continue their systematic assault on truth and justice, I will proudly stand in the breach with House Democrats and all people of goodwill to defend the concepts of truth, freedom, liberty, and justice for all, which is American democracy. And I'd like to thank the Capitol Hill police officers and the Metropolitan Police Department officers who defended us on that fateful day, and thank you, Speaker Emerita Pelosi, for your leadership during those troubled times. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by another member of the panel, a young lady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon, who is not necessarily one person in this situation, but we're trying to move forward, and we thank Ms. Torres for giving up her seat so you can join us. Ms. Scanlon, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you for arranging this hearing. I started January 6th, along with Congresswoman Dean, in a meeting with Democratic members of Congress from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was key to President Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election. He and his allies had spread lies and conspiracy theories about the votes in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, but those claims were universally debunked and disproven and rejected in over 60 different cases, although a third of them were in Pennsylvania. That didn't stop his big lie. It just grew bigger, culminating in the violent attack on this building on January 6th. My colleagues and I that morning knew we'd have to defend Pennsylvania's votes, including from our Republican colleagues who'd just been sworn in on the very same ballots they were now challenging. But we had no idea that a violent mob would interrupt Congress's vote count, turning this building into a war zone. I never expected to have to barricade the doors to my office or to see the Vice President, members of Congress, and staff fleeing for their lives, to see hundreds of injured police officers, some losing their lives and their livelihoods in the aftermath. Those officers are our guardians, but also our friends. There's one young officer who I still can't see without tearing up because I didn't see him for weeks after January 6th, and I was afraid he'd been grievously injured. So I do still embarrass him by crying on his shoulder. But most of all, I never expected that 5 years later, the lies that led to that tragic day would continue. While members of the president's own party begged for his help that day and condemned his actions for a few days afterwards, they quickly knuckled under and joined his effort to erase or rewrite history. The handful of Republicans who put loyalty to country over party at that time have been driven from that party, and those remaining have encouraged his pernicious lies to fester. In his second term, Trump has elevated his allies and pardoned those who attacked the police in this building on his behalf, and he's attacked the truth tellers. Just last month, the House Judiciary Committee refused to allow Special Counsel Jack Smith to testify publicly about the mountain of evidence he's compiled that proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump had tried to overturn the 2020 election, once again trying to slam the door on the truth. Everyone should read or watch Jack Smith's testimony. Look, our country was built on shared truths. The Declaration of Independence opens with truths that we hold to be self-evident. And our Constitution strives to form a more perfect union grounded in the common good. But this president and his allies have rejected that sturdy foundation of shared facts and values. Instead, they've built a house of cards on lies and greed and the pursuit of power. But houses without a secure foundation cannot endure. The truth matters. Those who deny the horrific violence and lawlessness that inspired the January 6th attack on the Capitol want the American people to forget. They don't want you to question their house of cards or hold them accountable. But we must remember. Ever since January 6th, our Republican colleagues have said it's time to move on so the country can unite. We need the country to unite, but to unite in respect for the truth and love of country. To unite in holding accountable those who would lie and undermine our Constitution, because we've seen the consequences of the failure to do so. There can be no unity or accountability without a shared truth based on facts. So today we remember and thank you for this opportunity. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Let me thank the witnesses for that testimony. I'd like to now excuse that witness and bring on our next panel of witnesses. We'll pause for the changeover.